It's a wild world out there, but some worlds are even wilder. Hi, my name is Tyler Hapney, and you're listening to Dungeons and Dystopias. Thank you for listening. Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Dungeons and Dystopias. My name is Tyler Hapney. I am your game master and host. I have game mastered hundreds of games of Cyberpunk Red and Dungeons and Dragons, and this podcast is a way for me to reconcile my thoughts on both of those systems. So today we're going to be talking a bit more about Dungeons and Dragons, and I figured we'd go into something a little philosophical today. I've spoken a lot about Planescape in here in the past. I've spoken on Sigil and the Turn of Fortune's Wheel campaign before, but I don't know how much deeper I've gotten into something that they call within the setting the Ascendant Factions, which are these, as of 5e, around 12 or so different factions that sort of operate within the multiverse. They make up some of the main philosophies you can find in Planescape and within the multiverse of D&D itself. So there were a lot in the second edition that aren't so much around anymore. And that was because there was a large faction war at the end of second edition Planescape, and some of those factions, well, they're just not around anymore. So we're not going to be talking too much about the ones that are gone. We're going to be talking more about the ones that are relevant as of 5th edition and Turn of Fortune's Wheel and all of that business. Some of them may be more relevant than others. Some of them are interesting. All of them are. And a lot of this information I'm going to be talking about, at least some of it comes from the, I guess, custom supplement, the Manual of the Planes. You can get it on DriveThruRPG. It's just a really, really good resource to have if you're going to have a multiplanar campaign. So getting started, let's talk about these different factions and kind of their basic beliefs. So the first one that is really interesting, I mean, when you can really consider what it is it's the Aethar. And these guys are known as Defiers because they are somehow atheists in Dungeons and Dragons, which is, of course, a setting where gods are confirmed to exist. So you might wonder, how does that work? How exactly do you be atheist in a setting like that? Well, it's not exactly atheism in the same way we would experience it in our current world, but it is rather a denial that the gods themselves have this sort of claim to divinity, and that typically these deities that people worship are adventurers that have ascended through other means, or they've channeled the use of something that's actually much more powerful than they are, which, in all honesty, isn't exactly false. I mean, we know Ao has someone he responds to, a higher power than even the Overgod, so it's extremely likely that that might be the case. I mean, you never know. We don't know much about who Ao orders to, or really if that's a thing for certain. It's just kind of something that's been sort of talked to about in very sort of rare instances. But for the most part, you could even consider Ao as that larger, true higher power that the Aethar might actually believe in. But even then, it's very unlikely that they'll be open about any sort of worship for anything, because typically to an Aethar, gods are just frauds, and they don't deserve the worship. So that's Aethar. The Bleak Cabal is fun. These guys are kind of like nihilists in a way. They don't believe in any meaning or truth to the multiverse. Every being has their own inherent meaning within them. These guys are known as Bleakers, and believe it or not, despite the name and what you might think, these guys are actually some of the most helpful people you might come across. I mean, the Bleak Cabal, they make like homeless shelters, soup kitchens, stuff like that. They're generally pretty nice people. I mean, I assume you could come across a pretty rude Bleaker once in a while, but for the most part, people will use that philosophy to, well, discover their own meaning. and help people out in discovering their own meaning as well. Now, as for evil potentially factions, the next few I think are going to fit that a little bit more, and that would be starting off with the Doomguard. So the Doomguard, rather than believe that there's no purpose or anything, they believe that everything is its purpose is to crumble, it's to fall and go to ruin, that the universe itself is slowly going to entropy and ruin, and it's the Doomguard's responsibility to either help that along or just be passive observers in the decay of everything around them, which obviously can lead to people being relatively evil with their philosophy, considering they could, help along that decay, or they could be rather very neutral in just sort of observing the way everything's kind of going off to the wayside and just sort of, observing. People who are in the Doomguard are known as sinkers. So, if you ever meet a sinker, just know there's a chance they might, want to make you go to chaos and ruin and crumble and decay. Who knows? The Fated are objectivists. The objective of the Fated is that you make your own fate and you're entitled to whatever you can take and whatever you can hold. They're known as takers. And I mean, it's pretty solid, kind of just what it says on the tin there. I mean, if they can get their hands on it and they can possess it, it is theirs and it was fated to be theirs. That is the idea of the Fated, and obviously the takers, and they're very much typically not seen as the nicest people, and one might be able to imagine. The next one is Fraternity of Order. See, this one we're getting into a bit more lawful. I don't know necessarily if we're good or evil here, but the Fraternity of Order, their whole thing is that all of existence is, in fact, governed by laws. And if you can understand and even govern those laws, that is where the true power in the multiverse sort of is withheld. So a lot of people, the Fraternity of Order, they're more dedicated towards establishing laws. So they might be lawmakers, politicians, stuff like that. The Fraternity of Order members are known as governors, which is kind of cute. But yeah, Fraternity of Order, they're honestly okay. They just believe in lawfulness and order and things like that. So obviously the exact opposite of the Doomguard and stuff like that. But the real exact opposite of the Fraternity of Order are the Hands of Havoc, also known as the Reekers. And they believe in the exact opposite of the Fraternity of Order, is that anyone who tries to impose order on the multiverse is a fool. And they are obviously going to be doomed to fail. So the people of the Hands of Havoc are more dedicated towards, I guess, that sort of chaotic sort of twist rather than the lawful. So in terms of alignment, the Fraternity of Order and Hands of Havoc sit on exact opposite ends of the quadrant spectrum between lawful and chaotic. I would say both of them do seem rather neutral in terms of, morals. So I think they're pretty both smack dab in the middle when it comes to being between good and bad. You can have good members of either and have bad members of either. It seems pretty simple to me. The Harmonium is the next one. These people are interesting. They want the universe to be in harmony. They want everything to be in peace or whatever. And they want that whether or not the people who are involved actually want it or not. They want everything to be harmonious no matter what. Even if some people don't want it that way, that's fine. They'll do it by force. So in Sigil, the Harmonium are actually the city guards, because they take their role so seriously that they are the ones who are actually trying to keep Sigil in a sort of lawful harmony. You might expect the Fraternity of Order or some of the later ones to do that, but nope, it is the Harmonium who is actually in charge of keeping the peace around Sigil. So honestly, just if you are going to want to be a guard or maybe join the guard, if you're in a Planescape campaign, joining the Harmonium is not a bad idea. I mean, considering what kind of King City guards and Sigil must get up to, I can imagine it would be at least moderately interesting. Next up, we've only got about 5 more here. The Heralds of Dust, otherwise known as the Dustmen, or Dusters. These people believe in a very sort of Buddhist sort of kind of sense that everyone is already dead and that we are ourselves in the afterlife already. And that, really the true meaning of existence is to find that sense of true death. So a lot of dustmen wind up kind of waiting around and collecting dust, as one might imagine. Um, they also the Heralds of Dust worship and idolize undeath as this sort of true. It's like the next stage of existence to the Dustmen is to become undead because they have died and they've seen the other side and all that other things. And yeah, the Dusters. If you ever play Planescape Torment, you meet the Dusters immediately. You start in the Morgue, which is their faction home. So honestly, if you're interested in the Dustmen, check out Planescape Torment, and in general, check out Planescape Torment because it is a really, really good game. Next up is the Mercy Killers. These guys are all about justice and doling it out. Justice is absolute and no one is above it. They are known as jailers because they are the type to hunt people down and take them out if they deem that it's necessary in order to perceive or pursue the sort of justice that they are requiring. So, naturally, the Mercy Killers can be both good or evil in that sense. But I think ultimately it does look like they do belong a little bit on the lawful side. And I would argue Mercy Killers are probably more on the evil side of lawful evil, if I had to guess. The next one is the Mind's Eye, which we're kind of getting into some of my more favorite ones here. The Mind's Eye is basically they're all about knowledge, and finding and exploring the multiverse and finding out as much about it as they can. The universe shapes us, and we shape it in turn. A member of the Mind's Eye faction might be inclined to go as far as they can in discovering the sort of power or things they can do to sort of ascend within the multiverse itself. So a Mind's Eye person, it's ultimately to me a bit more about curiosity and wanting to sort of see what's going on behind the scenes of the multiverse. And that becomes your life's purpose if you're within the Mind's Eye. So personally, I'd see a lot of wizards and a lot of scholars joining the Mind's Eye over the next two, at the very least. The next one is the Society of Sensation. These people, much like the Mind's Eye, are curious in exploring a lot of the proclivities and stuff that are on offer within the planes. But these people are more about the sensation and the feeling of things rather than the knowledge. They desire to know the universe more by feeling everything they can, by every sensation that they can imagine, every pain, every pleasure, everything. They want to experience it themselves so they can see all that the multiverse has to offer them. They are also known as sensates, and I forgot to mention, but the Mind's Eye are known as seekers. But the sensates are interesting. They're very hedonistic, I'd say, in their approach to things. And that can lead to both very good and very bad players. A lot of these factions, you'll notice, do leave a lot open for both good and bad interpretations of what their philosophies might mean and how that might affect characters involved. In our last Ascendant faction, is the Transcendent Order. And these guys are pretty cool, honestly, all things considered. These are your athletes, your gymnasts, all that sort of stuff, your daredevils. They believe that thought and hesitation clouds your actions and that your instinct is something that's been given to you by the multiverse. So in order to act within the scope of the multiverse and in step with what it wants, you must act by instinct and forego any mental sort of, I guess, negotiation when it comes to what to do and how to act. So these guys are known as ciphers, and they're basically no thoughts head empty. They trust that their gut instinct is something that the planes themselves, the multiverse itself, instilled within them for whatever purpose. So they're just gonna go with the flow. And if your instinct is, you match your mind with your instinct, you have in fact matched up with the multiverse. So those are the 12 different factions, and there's a lot more to go into with them. I mean, they all have bases and things like that. And I mentioned a couple of headquarters, but for the most part, that's sort of an introduction into what each faction believes. And as you can see, they're all very different in sort of their own approaches to the multiverse, and that obviously affects a lot of their interactions with the players, or if the players even join some of the factions, could influence the way their characters look at the multiverse and the world itself. I mean, Planescape is a very philosophical campaign. People are always wondering what their purpose in life is, and now they have a place where they can at least theorize on what that purpose may be. So those are the factions. We should get on to our monster of the week. And since we're talking about Planescape, I can really talk about just about anything that I want. So today I think I'm going to be talking about I don't know. Let's talk about an Oni. Onis seem fun. And for the most part, they're sort of not exactly used. I mean, they aren't used by my players, or I don't typically use them a ton in my campaign, but man, are they just a really, really cool monster. So obviously the Oni is based off of the sort of monster from the, sort of Japanese sort of myth. It can do quite a bit. CR7, so already starting off a little tough for your average party. Its weapons attacks are naturally magical. It can cast Darkness, Invisibility, Charm Person, Cone of Cold, Gaseous Form, and Sleep. It regenerates 10 hit points at the start of its turn, every turn, and there's nothing to stop that, as far as I'm aware. It can multi-attack twice with claws. It's got glaives, and of course, this is the big one. It can change its shape. It can go turn to a small or medium humanoid, into a large giant, or back into its true form. Its statistics are the same in each form, and the only equipment that is transformed along with it is the glaive, which shrinks that so it can be wielded in humanoid form. So obviously, you can encounter an Oni as anything, and you won't know it's an Oni until presumably it's attacking you with a glaive and dealing insane amounts of damage. So, yeah, I mean, it's an Oni. They're giants. Typically Onis can be seen as maybe a little trickstery. They're typically pretty violent creatures. They're not exactly the most peaceful. Um, they are prevalent mostly, according to the Forgotten Realms fandom page here, which I know, yay, for fandom.com, but they are mostly present in the eastern lands of Karator, which is, of course, in Toril, the Forgotten Realms, just to the east of Fae and all of that stuff. They're very similar to trolls, but they are almost that sort of Karatorian version of a troll, I would argue. Now, aside from the fact that there are violent creatures, they do at least enjoy dancing and music. So you might be able to get out of a interaction with an Oni if you manage to know the flute. It is of course considered unwise to interrupt an Oni dancing celebration, unless of course I'm guessing if you get in with your own flute, that might be pretty good. They're also, like many creatures in D&D, very protective of their treasure. Some Oni would of course swallow their treasures, only to throw them up later when they needed them, which is a fascinating way to keep your treasure. I honestly think more D&D parties should consider it. Why do you need a bag of holding if you've got a gut of holding? Anyways, Oni typically do not live amongst each other. They usually live in desolate areas, kind of on their own. They do have a chance to get up and band together, and they can get up to hundreds of members long if they do create these sorts of bands. But for the most part, as far as I've seen, Onis themselves seem to be sort of hermits, in general. But nevertheless, still very interesting creatures to throw into your D&D campaign, especially if you're doing Planescape. CR7, it is sort of like a different Rakshasa, kind of, which is that sort of tiger being that can do similar things with shape changing. But it's an Oni, so naturally going to be a little trickstery, I think, and very interesting. But that is going to be our monster of the week. Thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode. Next week, we will be talking more about Cyberpunk Red here on Dungeons and Dystopias. My name has been Tyler Habney. I've been your host. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week.